Hello, everybody. I'm Jack Reed with Future Pastimes, and welcome to Battle Language. My guests for this discussion about the Tleilaxu faction for Classic Dune are Jaded and GJ, who have participated in many of our Battle Language discussions and play a heck of a lot of Dune. And they have thoughts on this faction from the first expansion, the Ixians and Tleilaxu faction. And that was, I think those two factions were at the top of pretty much everybody's list when it came time to say, yeah, we're going to add some new factions to this game finally after 30 some odd years. There were plenty of homebrew attempts at these factions already, and we did look at those. But the other designers in Future Pastimes very much wanted to try to forge some new ideas. And in the intervening years, the Brian and Kevin books had come out with a lot more details on House Vernius, who are the Ixians, and a number of Tleilaxu characters. The ones that we were most familiar with from the Frank Herbert books came in Dune Messiah and later, Scytale and some of the other. Scytale back again much later, but the other guys opted for characters that were from those prequel books and focus on those instead. They had a long-standing rule of not wanting to add anything really if they could avoid it from the future books. So that is why we ended up with who we ended up with. But we're going to take a look at what the Tleilaxu faction does, and then we'll talk about the pros and the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses, how to play as and against them, what we think of that, and anything else that comes up. And we've loaded up a few other factions here because, first and foremost, the trader cards are going to be an integral part. But then there's some other things that players have occasionally asked about. So let's look at the faction sheet first of all. This is a faction that starts completely off the board. They've got nobody on the planet, or at least that's what they want you to think. They've got nobody on the planet to start off with. And they only start with 5 spice, so pretty poor initially. They've got a pretty good revival, and in fact, it's even better than it looks, as we'll get into later on. But this is an economic faction, so even though they start off poor, they are going to, as the game wears on, be earning more and more. And it's not unusual if a game goes 5, 6, or more turns that they can get extremely wealthy. It just depends on who else is in the game. Certainly if there are one or other economic factions, if the Emperor is in the game or the Guild, they tend to spend to revive more, and they have a low free revival rate, both of them anyway. And they can make deals to get leaders out, so they can get income from that. But yeah, we'll get into that. We're looking at the faction sheet. The basic advantages, it's really just 2 things. It's just face dancers and the tanks revival stuff. And then there's Zoal. We have some special rules on Zoal, who's one of the leaders, and you can see right away why he might need some lines of explanation. There was one extra line of explanation that was supposed to be on the sheet, and they didn't make it. So we will cover that as well. And they just have the one advanced game advantage, but it can be very impactful in a couple of ways. So we're going to take a look at that as well. So we'll start with the face dancers. That's the first thing. So it says, at the start of the game, they're not going to be dealt trader cards, at least not right away. What's going to happen is every other player is going to be selecting their traders normally and then returning their cards that they don't choose, and that's everybody except the Harkonnen is going to be returning a bunch of cards. They're going to shuffle that up, and then the Tleilaxu will draw 3 cards. So that is a big deal, and it's funny because when we first started working on it, we knew we wanted face dancers to be a big part of the faction. And there was this talk about a whole new set of face dancer cards, but it was me who suggested, we have a set of cards already for every leader in the game. Let's just use that instead of adding in, because if we did other expansions, we were going to have to add in more face dancer cards for that. And so I was like, let's just use this. So that was, if you like the idea, then you're welcome. And if you hate the idea, then sorry. But it is what it is. And it's a much more practical approach. But, if they draw some leaders, they're going to get a mixed bag. So like here, like
Mhm.
leaders like this, by and large, are not chosen by other factions to be traitors. These ones, because these guys, I don't know. If I'm in a battle with Atreides and they are using the one, this is a battle that maybe they didn't think they were going to win anyway, and so. Yeah, I mean, we have friends who love to choose the ones because they're like, I'm definitely going to get to use a traitor call. But it almost, to me, like a lot of times feels like it was a waste. Like, oh, what am I getting? Like I'm winning this battle here with my two guys, and I'll collect 4 spice and 1 spice for Yui. And so it's like I guess it was kind of worth it, but I don't know. So yeah, you occasionally will get somebody good. The other thing that you will also typically get are your own leaders, as the Tleilaxu, which is you're good. You know that these guys are safe when you get them, but they're not useful. But um, every once in a while, somebody like Raban, that could be a very useful because this is the second best leader in the Harkonnen lineup, not counting capture ones. But they're going to have these face dancer cards, and they don't act as traitors. So if I am in a battle with uh, Atreides and they are using Dr. Yui, I can't reveal this card and say, aha, he's a traitor. What needs to happen is Dr. Yui needs to win a battle. So if he does win the battle, then as the Tleilaxu, I can say, haha, that's actually not Dr. Yui. That is a face dancer pretending to be Dr. Yui. And so that face dancer will get killed. And any of the Atreides forces who survived that battle that they just won are going to return to their reserves. So here we have a nice little example. They're going to return to their reserves and they'll be replaced with Tleilaxu forces. So if they had 4 forces left over, now those are go back to the Atreides homeworld or whatever to their reserves, and now they have some Tleilaxu. Now that still counts as a win. So if there was spice, like if Atreides killed the opposing leader, they would get spice for that leader. They get to keep their treachery cards that they would normally keep. But they just don't have any forces there anymore, and so that's a big deal. They're not killed, so that's nice. Although the leader is killed, so Doctor Yui would go to the tanks, and nobody would get any spice for him. Um, but as you can see from this example, um, the Tleilaxu weren't fighting that battle. It was a battle between Atreides and the Harkonnen, and so that's the real insidious part of the face dancers is that the with the traitor call, you have to be in the battle. You have to be facing Atreides and saying, "Aha, I've got this leader as a traitor." But the face dancers, they don't have to be involved at all. Now, this is, I think, one of the really interesting and powerful parts of this faction. It is one of the things that a lot of people, when they first learned about this ability, they were like, well, this is absurdly overpowered, and the Tleilaxu can win the game on turn one without even doing anything. And while that technically is true, it's astronomical that that would happen. But it does make the game very tense because, you've done this whole thing where you've chosen leaders. And if I'm Atreides and I was dealt this leader, I and didn't choose him, he's going to go back into that deck. And I don't know that he's a safe leader. It used to be in the olden days, you would be like, well, I know Dr. Yui is safe. But now he's not. You don't know anybody who is safe unless you have chosen to keep that leader. If I'm Atreides and I keep Dr. Yui, well, I know he's my one safe leader, can't be a traitor, can't be a face dancer, but now I don't have a traitor. And so and that's a legal move. You can do that, but it can be you're giving up a potential win. So that's our first advantage, guys. What are your thoughts on the face dancers? And there's some other nuances that we'll cover.
It's probably the most polarizing advantage in the entire game. People hate it, people love it, and there's no in between. There's nobody that has a vague, okay, it's fine feeling towards it. Either you're enjoying playing with and against it, or you kind of wish this entire fashion sheet was never written in the first place. Which is a really interesting thing. Like I do absolutely understand the concerns, but like as you said, Tleilaxu can win without doing anything. And as many people say, there's literally nothing the other faction can do. Like you already won the battle, you already fought, and then suddenly you actually didn't win much because you lost control of the stronghold. Maybe your win attempt went away and whatnot, and there's nothing you can do to prevent a face dance, not even a Karama card. So I do understand it's
Yeah,
mean. It's probably not the most
it is.
fairness thing in the world,
I feel
but
like I feel like though
I
over
don't have any
time
issue.
there were far more people who hated it and didn't like it before they ever played a game with the Tleilaxu. And to their credit,
Yeah.
many of the haters did end up playing in some games. I mean, some people went straight to we're going to house rule this or we're changing it to completely different faction, and that's fine. You know, make Dune what you want to make of it. But a lot of the of people who were like, I think this is a terrible idea, and after they played it, they went, all right, you know what? It's not as bad. I mean, many of them are still like, well, I don't love this, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going
Mhm.
to be, just because it is. It's hard to get those stars to align so that you're like, haha, I've won. I've not won, but I've replaced a winner here and a winner there, and it's funny to me also how over time, a lot of people, some of them the same people, who are the game is about to be over and they're like, oh please call a face dancer. Like that's our only recourse at this point is if that is a face dancer, then that will stop this win. And they're hoping for it, and it almost never kind of works out for them. So it's very dramatic when it does happen. I mean, just having a face dancer happen at all is relatively uncommon. It doesn't happen very often in a game. I've played the game where the Tleilaxu didn't call a single face dancer the whole game. Um, I think you usually get one call. You get one, and in a fair amount of time you'll get two, but not in the same turn usually. And so because they know if they reveal once this is revealed, if I've called Beast Raban, he stays face up, and I can't call him again. So if somehow Raban gets out of the tanks, which can happen, he can now be safely used because I can't reveal this again. It's already revealed and it stays revealed. So I can only call a particular character once. Um, and one of the things you can do at the end of a turn is if you've got unrevealed ones, you in the Mentep pause, you can shuffle one back into the deck and then draw a replacement. And sometimes you get the same one, or you get another one of your own leaders, or another weak leader who's probably not going to come up. But every once in a while, you can make that a better option. You can't do that with the revealed ones. So you're waiting, and once you do reveal all three of them, you get to immediately shuffle them all into the deck and draw three new unrevealed. And again, you might get somebody who you've just revealed before, but usually you'll get a nice mix of some new characters, and that can be powerful as well. So you technically could have more than three face dancers revealed in the same turn. But again, that I have never
As if.
heard happen.
That's
And
absurd. Yeah.
yeah, that would be crazy. Somebody would flip the table, I think, if that
Oh yeah,
happened.
100%.
And who could blame them? But yeah, it's just again, it just doesn't happen that often. You usually at the end of the game, you're like, well, I revealed two of them, and that was fun. But sometimes you get a nice dramatic. We have seen it where the Tleilaxu were in a stronghold. Their ally was in two strongholds, and then a battle, and then voila, it's a face dancer, and we did win the game through face dancer antics. And but yeah, for me, it's like that's a dramatic and memorable experience. It's certainly not super positive for all the losers, but to me, it's just like winning through a traitor call. It has that same kind of characteristic. You're like, I was going to win this battle. I was all set. I had the laser gun. I had the superior numbers. I had all the spice I ever could need. I couldn't lose, and it was a traitor call. That's a very dramatic ending and very memorable and very possible. Face dancers, it kind of just ups the ante. I think it makes the game just overall a lot more tense. And so um, I'm responsible for this, so it's not going to be a surprise to anyone that I absolutely love them. The Tleilaxu are my favorite favorite faction, and not just because they're purple, and I love to play purple, but one of the reasons why I made them purple was because I liked this faction so much. So I was like, I'm probably going to end up playing with the purple tokens and whatnot more often than any other color if it's up to me. And so I'm glad that they are the Tleilaxu because I just love to play this faction.
Yeah, I'm not so hot on the face dancers lately, and this I find them too random for my taste. And this is someone who's BT for me is a top three faction, easy. I'm not sure where they line up exactly, but top three faction, and it's just I've heard of games where they can call six face dancers and then they can shuffle them out two times in a single game. And I've certainly had some games where I've called a lot of face dancers, but really most of my best wins I haven't even called a single one. And so it's a whole half of the sheet for an ability that, you might just not get the opportunity to use. It's definitely dramatic when it does happen, but I mean, sometimes you can have the best ones. You can have Stilgar, and you can have Fade and Staban Tuick. But if the stars don't align correctly, it's just a dead ability.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I
It's all
think,
the stuff on the other side
yeah.
for me that makes me love them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's definitely more to come. I think in terms of strategies with the face dancer, some people are like, well, it's just random. You just do whatever. But I think that there is a little bit more to it than that.
Mhm.
And so I've been in a situation where I had a relatively good leader. You have a Chani or an Othium who are pretty strong leaders. But what you have to do is you have to take into account the game state and as well as the player. If somebody is like, I'm playing the Fremen, but I'm playing them very conservatively. I am risk averse, and I'm not getting into a bunch of battles. I'm acting more of a scavenger, or I'm waiting for the Nexus. Then you're like, you know what? Maybe these leaders aren't that attractive. They need to get into battles. So you're looking for who are the aggressive players, and those are the leaders that I want to hold on to. And even if they're the lower ones, you're like, well, they're going to possibly get into multiple battles at some point, so they can't use the same leader everywhere. So even if I've got Cade or something like that, the Emperor is really going in, especially if you're like, well, a Ramsham's in the tank, so he's down one of his best leaders. Yeah, it seems more likely he's going to use this other leader. Now, a lot of that is again the luck of the draw. You're going to start with who are my first three, and if it's this, I've got a couple of ones, and I got a four who's pretty good. But how aggressive is the Harkonnen player? Are they really going out there? Are they just playing it safe? And they're like, I'm just trying to build up my hand. I'm leaving my forces in Carthage. I'm not really going out after spice. I'm spending all my spice on cards and not really doing anything because maybe they just have some bad draws. They're like, I've got 3 cheap heroes and a worthless card and weather control. So I was like, I just don't want to get into battles. Then you're like, I don't know. I mean, in this mix here, yeah, I'm getting rid of one of these at the end of the first turn. But then yeah, at some point, if I've got some mid guys here, I might get rid of Urban if the Harkonnen player is just not really doing much, and focus on the other players. The other thing that you got to think about doing, and maybe Harkonnen is not your best target for this sort of action, but if you're you've like I've got a couple of these, I've got a couple of Atreides leaders. I need to go get into some fights with the Atreides and really think about shaking things up. If I've got 2, I mean that's there's only 3 other leaders that they could use, and you know what? This thing right here is not going to protect you from a face dancer. So they could be like, aha, I'm using Gurney Halleck and I've got the 6. And it was like, well, that was great. But Gurney Halleck was a face dancer. So he's dead. And, you still got your Kwisatz Haderach, but, those forces are now gone. And the forces that get replaced, they weren't killed. They just got sent home because it turns out they never left. So yeah, that's the other thing is that you have some agency over this. You can't just be like, well, I'm just going to sit back and hope that somebody else gets into these fights with the Atreides, and then I get lucky within there. I like to stir things up as the Tleilaxu, because the other thing about that, is, of course, which we'll get into here, but you want to keep getting forces into those tanks, including your own forces. The Tleilaxu should always have, by the end of a round, at least one of their guys in the tanks waiting to be revived, because that's just makes good economic sense, as we'll find out as we go to their other main basic advantage. So yeah, make these things happen, either by trying to be a little strategic, or taking a chance on shuffling somebody in to see if you can get a better mix. And you might be like, all right, I've got two leaders of the Emperor, or two Fremen leaders, mid range. So maybe I've got Chani and Othium, and even mid range. I mean, those are really good leaders. And so now I'm just waiting for them to go for the win, or I'm waiting for them to be positioned where I can go harass them and try to make that face dancer reveal occur. And that's the ticket, I think, to having that happen a little bit more. You're not. It's less of a. I'm waiting for the stars to align, as we said, or taking, waiting for chance to make this happen. I'm trying to make it happen myself. So yeah, that's how the face dancers work. So yeah, let's go ahead and flip over. We're talking about a revival, and there's a lot of elements here. It talks about no revival limits. That means they can revive if they've got 20 forces in the tanks and they've got the spice. They can get all 20 forces out. No limits there. They've got two leaders in the tanks. They can say, yeah, I'm getting them both out. There's no limits. I can do what I want. And then any payments that they make are going to be half price rounded up. So if they're reviving Hidar Fenagitica, that's only 2 spice for him, and 2 more spice to also get Master Zaf out. So that's pretty handy. And then forces, of course, they get 2 for free. Everybody else only costs 1 spice because it's half price. So that's nice. And then everyone else's revival payments are made to you. Now, normally in a normal game, the only other revival payments that you're typically going to make are 1 or 2 forces to get you up to 3. Okay, 3 is the normal limit, and everyone gets a certain amount out for free, the average being about 2. So you'd be like, all right, am I going to spend 2 spice to get 1 more force out? And most of the time the answer is no. Nobody wants to spend spice to get forces out. They'd rather spend that spice on cards and shipping, or bribes, or something along those lines, spice dialing if you're playing advanced. But it's the richer factions that are gonna pay. But the Tleilaxu can also bump that 3 limit up to 5, and so now you're like, all right, if I've got a lot of forces in there, maybe I am spending some to get more out. We also decided to open up the market a little bit more by relaxing the restrictions on leader revival. So normally you can't revive any of your leaders until you have no leaders available, and then you can get 1 per turn by spending however much the strength is in spice. So Dr. Yui would only cost you 1, but Gurney would cost you 4, and so on. But the Tleilaxu can fiddle with that. They can say, yeah, you can get Dr. Yui out now, but he will cost 2, not just 1. And if you agree, then they can make that happen, because you'd be like, all right, we know that Dr. Yui is a safe leader because he just got face danced. So you're like, yeah, maybe it is worth 2 spice to have that 1 safe leader all the time. Or maybe the Tleilaxu, like, for a safe leader, 5 spice, especially if they've seen you just get a bunch of spice from a spice blow and they know that you've got the money for it. So you have to decide, and maybe you can negotiate. You can say, look, how about 4? Or like 4 is absurd. Give them to me for 3. So they have that ability as well. And there's some nuance here. If they can't be in a position where if you've got all of your leaders are dead, that they can say, yeah, every leader costs 12 spice. So pay up, or you're just not going to have a leader. You are not going to be in that situation. If you are forced to buy a leader out, you get them for their normal value. So the Tleilaxu can't jack it up. Although we have ruled that they can discount it. So they can say, yeah, I'll give you a Ramsham for 3 rather than 5. But they can't extort money from you. Now, what's really nice about this is if you're allied with the Tleilaxu, technically the alliance advantage here is that they have half-priced forces and leaders. But really, they can give their ally a leader for free. They can just go, oh, yeah, Count Fenring, 6? No, how about free? I'm just going to give them to you for free. They can give you the discount on the extra forces, and they say, yeah, that's fine. Let's do that. But it's only if if the ally is the emperor and the emperor has all of their leaders in the tanks, then they can say half price. They can't. Well, actually, they can still give it to you for free. So I mean, that's the great thing about it is they can always just go, here you go. You can have this leader. So yeah, the revival is interesting because the one last thing about the revival is that the free revival, anyone who takes free revival, including the Tleilaxu, a Tleilaxu get 1 spice from the spice bank. So we felt like only limiting income to paid revivals was not going to make them a very economical faction. They needed to also get that extra little income for free revival. It's they're skimming off of their own profits and probably from the Imperium to get that 1 spice for each free revival. So that's the main reason why if I, as the Tleilaxu, am always getting into at least one battle every round somewhere. I've saved the 1 spice so I can ship one guy down to go mess with somebody. Probably not the Harkonnen because I don't want them capturing a leader because this is a sacrifice. I'm not only trying to get a force killed so that I can revive it. I'm usually also trying to get Blinn killed, as we'll see here when we talk about the advanced advantages. So that's revival. Let's go back to our panel of Dune experts and talk a little bit about the ups and downs and what we like about the revival abilities of the Tleilaxu.
Yeah, I mean, the revival
Yeah.
phase is really where they just get into that interesting. There's so many ways you can play Tleilaxu just because of the control you have over the revival phase, which is very unique. You know, the guilds, they can't directly discount shipping rates, and the Emperor can't just buy you cards unless you're his ally. But the Tleilaxu, they can really wheel and deal. And they're one of the few factions that can sell something that that they don't have. They can sell discounts, which is super valuable because you can get card information from the Atreides, or you could get some sneaky deal with the Ixians where you see what the bid pile is, or really any number of deals, and you don't have to directly sell anything like giving spice or giving information if you're Atreides. Super useful.
I feel like the ability to make deals with something that is other than spice or information is extremely unique and extremely powerful. Like the leaders at some point don't just go beyond just being warriors. They are actual bargaining chips. You can offer deals to Atreides, for example, to revive their first leader that dies in exchange for 5 cards up for bid of information or whatever. You can ask Harkonnen to not call your traitor on a fight or something. You can ask the Emperor for money. You can ask Guild. You can ask Fremen for the storm information. All just without paying a single spice. All just promising the fact that they will have the ability to have one of their 5 only leaders back in case it dies.
Yeah,
You almost don't care if your leader dies. Actually, as we'll talk later, you're sometimes even happy if it happens.
it
But the
does. I
other
mean,
factions
yeah.
don't.
It can spur some action too. You can say, look, go in
Yeah.
there and fight that faction. And yeah, I will revive that leader for free in the next turn, just for you doing this for us. But you can also be like, and also bribe me 3 spice. So you can, but you can direct action. You can make those stronghold blocking moves a little less painful for players. You can say we can't allow so and so to go after that spice blow uncontested, and you're like, I know you don't want to get into a fight, but go in there and go in there, Fremen, with Chani, and you're forcing them. If they can't kill her, they have to dial high. And if they can't kill her, then you're just going to get her back. So let's not worry about that as well. So yeah, that deal thing opens up a lot of possibilities for the players and for certain gameplay itself. And yeah, it's totally legal. You can absolutely make those kinds of deals.
And the beautiful thing is that it helps you Tleilaxu as well, since if you offer someone a free leader revival, they're more incentivized to fight someone. So get in, ship, dial, make the other person dial as well, which in turn means you are going to have more consistent income as time goes on.
Yeah,
Since
that's two
your
spice right
number
there.
one thing, yeah, exactly. It's number one thing is that you're extremely poorly early on. You want to get your economy started as soon as possible. And the best way to do it is just get people killed. So you can only ship once per turn. Maybe if you're lucky, you can also move, so you can maybe get two fights. But if you can get other people to fight each other for some common mean, and they can do it safely because the leader is going to come back anyway, suddenly you go from one spice a turn to two, three, perhaps four even. And early on, when you start so poor that most of the time you're even worse than Fremen, you just want to kick that economy engine as quickly as possible, and the ability to have so much freedom in deal making is one of the most powerful and probably underrated parts of this faction.
We
And
had
honestly,
in
it's
our
really great.
9-player game last year, the Emperor was bribing the Tleilaxu to up the revival limit for them to 5, which was going to be more income anyway. But they're like, look, I'll pay you 5 spice if you promise to up my revival limit to 5 next turn. And I'm going to get into this battle here and really just cause trouble. And so the Tleilaxu faction was making a lot of bank through this sort of thing, and they could say, "Hey, you've got the money for it." And in fact, I will limit everyone else to 3 revival, so we can keep them down. But if you're getting 5 out, that's 25% of your total forces that you can revive each round. So you always feel like you're back in it relatively quickly, and you can say, "Yeah, I can afford to lose 5 forces in a battle because I can just get them out." You know, if I'm rich enough, then yeah, no big deal, and that's great news for the Tleilaxu. So yeah, this whole deal making aspect again, it feeds into that social part of Dune that is probably my favorite part of the game or the gameplay is that you can make these kind of unconventional deals in the game. It's totally legal, and it just adds a lot of interesting depth and gameplay to what goes on.
Oh, and it must be said though, because as Tleilaxu you can set the prices, your income can actually move with, how much money is in the game. If you got a game with a lot of economic factions and there's a lot of spice going around, you can match your prices. But the guild, for example, can't. It's still always the same 1 spice to a stronghold, 2 anywhere else. So they can, I mean, usually they won't be hurting for spice if there's a lot of economy factions, but still, you can adjust to, the current prices. If
Yeah.
treachery cards are only going for 3 or 4, you might want to keep them low. But if it's like up to 9 or 10 spice for a random treachery card, maybe the leaders should go at a similar rate too.
Yeah, and you're
And
you're able to see, who just collected 12 spice at the spice blow,
Mhm.
or they were in a battle and 2 high valued leaders died, so they just collected 10 spice from that battle. So you have a good sense of who's got money to spend, and so when that revival comes around, you can say, "Hey, you know what? How'd you like to get Lady Jessica out of the tanks, or this other leader?" And even if even if it's like Lady Jessica for 4 spice, that's 4 more spice than you would have been able to get otherwise. And the fact that this revival happens after bidding, if the tanks have got a lot of activity, the Tleilaxu can feel like, yeah, I can spend most, if not all, of the spice that I have in the bidding round and make sure that I get a card, maybe even 2 cards. I'm going to get some money and revival that will allow me to ship in some capacity. Again, even if it's just like I just want to be able to ship, 2 forces down into Carthage and move one of them over here, so that I'm in 2 battles. Because if this is with 2 different players, that's going to be 3 spice most likely in the next revival at a minimum, and possibly more. And maybe there'll be a face dancer. It depends on, again, if I've got a face dancer for this faction and for this faction. It sometimes is worth kind of going in there and seeing what can happen. And every once in a while, I have the luxury of they played Raban in that battle, and I did not call them as a face dancer because you know what, it's early, and there was only going to be 3 forces there, so it's more valuable to me to lull them into a false sense of security. They're like, oh, well, at least Raban is safe now. I'll use him again, and then maybe I have a bigger battle later on, or a more consequential one, or tell my ally, go in there and fight him, and we'll take advantage of his false sense of security with that. So, finishing off our basic advantages is this note about Zoal. So as you can see, Zoal has an X in terms of his battle strength there. And the X is going to be whatever battle strength the opposing leader had. So Zoal against Dr. Yui, well, then Zoal's only a 1. But Zoal against Stilgar is a 7. So that is, it's really nice for equalizing. If you know that you can have a force advantage, or you've got the storm order, so in this case here, the Tleilaxu are going to win ties. They can say, all right, yeah, if both leaders live, I think I can win this battle, just because it doesn't matter which leader they use. They're not going to get an advantage over me in leader strength. So that is useful. Couple of notes about this. One is the one that's not on the sheet. Well, none of this is really on the sheet, but what we do say is he's a 0 against a cheap hero, so that's pretty clear. How much does it cost to revive Zoal? Well, it costs 3 spice, and that is not, it costs 3, and then you discount that down to 2 because I have price. It's just a flat rate of Zoal always costs 3 to revive for the Tleilaxu. So a couple other things is one of the reasons we got this out is if Zoal is in a battle here like this against Dr. Yui with the Kwisatz Haderach, well, this makes Dr. Yui a 3, but Zoal is still just a 1. Doesn't get to add in the Kwisatz Haderach as well. And it should note that if you're using leader skills from this second expansion, so if you've got a skill like, let's say, well, even the War Master here. War Master, and he's got a worthless card in the battle plan that adds 3 to the leader disc. Zoal doesn't copy that either. He's only going to copy the value that is written on the leader itself. So here, this is actually not too shabby for the Atreides, where they have a 6 strength in this scenario here, where they've got the Kwisatz Haderach with a worthless card in their battle plan, Dr. Yui, against 1. So Zoal, while Zoal is pretty good, pretty effective, not as overpowered as one might be led to believe. Doesn't copy any of those other extraneous elements. But again, it's a nice little wild card for players to deal with, and it's a good one. Zoal is actually a pretty good trader card to hold on to because inevitably the Tleilaxu are going to be tempted to use him in a battle. So that's the deal with Zoal. Any thoughts from you guys on the X-Man?
I just love it. I just love the theme of it. It's the perfect face dancer. Just is whoever the opponent wants to be. It's just interesting. It adds a little spice to the otherwise quite unamusing and not impressive leader selection Tleilaxu has. Since Blinn and Wick are likely going to die very quickly.
1, 2, 3,
the
4.
others are 4 and 3, which are not great. Zoal just adds a little extra, I guess, randomness. Yeah, it's something that you as someone fighting BT, you always have to be weary of that. You cannot just count them off as like, okay, at most it's a 4. Because if you play Stilgar and someone brings out Zoal, they can win the fight single-handedly because of this. So it's something you always have to keep in mind and never really forget.
Yeah, and in that
It's just a
example,
really
if
interesting thing.
if Stilgar and Zoal are killed, or if just Zoal is killed, or whatever, um, that means that's 7 spice for
Hmm.
rendering Zoal down. So, whatever spice you get for killing Zoal is going to be equal to what his value was in that battle. So, if it was against a cheap hero, well, then it's nothing. If it's against Dr. Yui, where he's got the +2 and the +3, it's 1. You're going to get 1 spice for Zoal because that's what Dr. Yui is. He's a 1. So I have seen a fight where the Tleilaxu were up against Stilgar. Both leaders were killed, and somebody collected 14 spice, and so you were like, "Oh, geez, that's more than if you got the whole motherload right there." So yeah, I do love Zol. It's a nice little extra little wild card that the Tleilaxu have, and makes it pretty enjoyable for me. Jay, did you have anything else you were going to say?
Uh, it's just, it's nice. It's only a couple lines of text, but it really does feel like a face dancer, and it's not. It doesn't have a lot of mental overhead like some other concepts I've seen where he's like the strongest leader in the tanks is his what he's worth. It's just neat.
Yeah.
And realistically, in most times, it would probably be more useful if Zol was just a strength 5 leader. But
Mhm.
when it does come in handy, it's always a really great moment to see.
Yeah, and the whole table goes, "Oh, he's a 6." So yeah, that is a hoot. All right, and our final advantage is the one advanced game advantage, and it is Gholas. So the way this works is if the Tleilaxu have one or more of their leaders in the tanks, which means they don't have 5 leaders, and let's say I don't know, grab us a juicy one out of say the let's
Good old
say
Fade.
yeah, let's say
Mhm.
Fade is in the tank. So when we get to the revival phase, the Tleilaxu can say, you know what? We're not going to revive Blinn. We're going to create a Gola of Fade Rautha. And guess what? Uh, he's half price. So for 3 spice, they can say, great, now we've got this 6 strength leader at our disposal. Sorry, Harkonnen, but there's not really much. It's not like I can sell this to you. He's like, no, this is a Tleilaxu leader now. Now, if he goes back to the tanks, I can say, sure, I'll sell him back to you. And of course, if they have no leaders available, they could just buy Fade Out for 6 spice. But that's not usually going to happen. And I've seen the Tleilaxu where they managed to get rid of all of their low value leaders, and they had Chani and Count Fenring and Fade, and now they are very scary. Um, and sometimes this leader is dead because he was a face dancer. So now it's insult and injury because they know that this is a safe leader because there's probably a face up trader card for Fade sitting over here waiting for 2 more face dancers to be revealed. So they know they can use him with impunity. If he gets killed, they can just spend 3 spice again and revive him one more time as another Gola. And so this is a very scary faction ability. And they are just waiting and hoping for some really good leaders to end up in the tanks. And yeah, that's Golas. I think Golas is more powerful than face dancers, in my opinion.
100%.
But yeah,
It's
what do you guys think about that?
it's both more powerful and a lot more crippling and game warping in a sense. Because if you are on, well, if someone else is unlucky enough to get a lot of their leaders killed, and you as Tleilaxu want to make their game miserable, you 100% can. You just take all of their leaders as Golas, and now they have maybe 1 or 2 leaders left. And since now their Golas are yours, and you control when they fight, if they die, and what it happens to them once they're in the tanks, you can effectively make someone have an entire game with 2 leaders.
Yeah, and if you
Which
don't have a leader, if if the other leaders get killed or they're in enough battles where they don't have enough leaders. You cannot play treachery cards without a leader, and so which we had happen in our absurd 9-player game at Gen Con last year. The guild, they all of their leaders were in the tanks just about every round, starting from turn 5 or 6, and they'd revive one, but then they get into 2 battles, and in the second battle they had no cards, so there wasn't really anything they could do, and that was how the good guys ended up winning. But if I were to do a revision of this, I might consider doing 2 things. One, making the Gholas limiting to so you can only have 1 Ghola for each faction, which I think is not too much of a nerf, and it does help reduce the likelihood of that nightmare scenario where you're like, oh great, you've got Stilgar and Chani. And maybe have Othim as well. So I'm down to shout out Mapes and Jamis, and there's just no way I'm going to win any battles with them. And the other thing would be to maybe say, all right, if I have a face dancer revealed for a faction, I cannot reveal another face dancer of the same faction. I think that might alleviate some of the heartache that players have, so that at least they have some information. They know, okay, if I'm Harkonnen, he's revealed Uman Kadu. I don't know how Uman Kadu won a battle, but he did. And so now I know that my other leaders are safe. Yeah, it could be. Well, he wouldn't be a traitor if he was a face dancer. But
Harkonnen gets a traitor call, and then using Uman Kadu, and then you face dance him.
Yeah,
always
that's
a great
the best.
moment.
That is the best when that happens. And yeah, you're like, I won through the traitor. He's like, well, I also won through the face dancer. So yeah, that's certainly one way that it could happen. And so yeah, you know, as a Harkonnen, all right, for the time being, none of my other leaders are face dancers. And then if they get the reveal, everyone's going to go back, and now nobody's safe again for a while. So I think that would it's probably how we should have gone about it. You should have seen how this worked before the final version. It was, once revealed, it was immediately shuffled back in. And so you always had 3 unrevealed. And so you could have just reveal after reveal, battle after battle. And I did win the game with several face dancers in the same turn. And I think Bill and Greg were like, this must change. So we did say, all right, once it's revealed, it just stays revealed until you've revealed them all. They did want to do the reshuffle. And I think that would keep that as well. But yeah, I think Gholas has the potential to be even scarier in some ways than face dancers do. So, and just because they have that flexibility, they don't have to be like, well, you know, Uman Kadu is the only one in the tanks, and I could revive another. I think I'd just rather only have 4 leaders, and I'm waiting. I can wait. I don't have to settle for a weak leader, like a 2 or a 3. I can wait until there's a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or maybe a 7. And then say, yeah, that guy is now one of my guys, and that is the best. It's right up there. You know, I love the Harkonnen leader capture because they can do the same thing. They can be like, oh, you know, they're not taking them out of the tanks, but they're like, I just stole this leader. It wouldn't be this one, of course, but I've stolen your really good leader. They can kill them for 2 spice, but I like to collect people. When I'm the Harkonnen, I'm like, oh, this is year 1 or year 2. That's fine. I'm just going to hold on to them because they can just hold on to them forever.
Yep.
And they don't have to ever give that guy back. And so it's on the same ballpark as the Ghola. So that's why Harkonnen are probably they're my top 3 factions to play. I'm just drawn to these bad guys. Guess who the other one in my top 3 is? It's Moritani. So I like the evilest, scummiest factions are my favorites to play. Hark, Moritani, and Tleilaxu, with the purple guys, of course, being on top. But yeah, I enjoy all of those abilities. And yeah, you got a good leader in there. You better be trying to make a deal. You'll be like, look, and it can't be, it may not be, I will pay 10 spice if you let me revive Fade and don't make him a Ghola. You might have to do some other stuff like, I will never call traitor against you. And if you don't Golify my best dude, and let's work out a way for me to get him, or I'll do X, Y, or Z. I'll give you half of the spice I collect from my next 3 spice blows. Something. And it's a terrible situation to be in because the Tleilaxu have the upper hand. Because with that discount, they can generally afford to revive whoever they want. So they might be like, well, I'm not shipping this turn, but I've got Stilgar. So that's a pretty good trade-off, I'd say. And now they're able to just kind of go about trying to win the game the old-fashioned way. They're now no tricks. It's just like, I'm going to go in there. Hopefully I've got a weapon and a defense, but I got a really strong leader and dial, and then voila. I just overpower you because I've got the best leaders in the game. And that's really what makes them one of the scariest factions to be playing against.
Yeah, the hilarious part about making a deal as Tleilaxu that you won't get a traitor called against you is that they can't even just see that, oh, well, I don't have any Tleilaxu traitors, so that's an easy deal. Because he can never predict which leader Tleilaxu might be able to revive for themselves. It's devilish.
Yeah.
Yep. Honestly, Tleilaxu is super fun once if you play them in a group you are like somewhat comfortable with, and the table talk just keeps going and going and going. With the amount of deals, stupid things, absurd agreements you can come to just with leader discs, it's actually incredible. They are such as a useful resource that no one else has even any remote access to. So you're free to do whatever you want and make it as interesting, as wild, and as lucrative as possible. And honestly, there's nobody else that can do anything even remotely close.
I do like having leader skills in a game with the Tleilaxu more than any other faction, and that is because if you're like, all right, Fade is my skilled spice banker. Well, he got killed, and now I've lost this skill, but now you are much more likely to get a revival of a leader much sooner than you would otherwise normally do. And then you've got a choice of 2 things. You're like, yeah, I'm going to make him a skilled leader. And you're like, oh, you know what? With the Tleilaxu in the game, I think having him as a Rahani Decipherer might be really good. So that is a nice little side perk, is because normally once that skilled leader dies, well, you probably have no skills for the rest of that game, just because you're probably not reviving that leader. Unless you draw that Ghola card. Leaders that are killed in the game are usually dead for the whole game. So you have to have a really crappy game if you're getting to the point where like, oh, I can finally revive Fade because everybody's dead. Yeah, you probably can't afford Fade at that point. You're getting Uman Kadu again. And sure, you could make him a skilled leader, but at that point, you're like, wow,
Why?
I don't know how much help he's going to be as a spice
Yeah.
banker or whatever. He's my new war master, and I don't have any worthless cards for a change. So yeah, it's just I like that it jazzes that up a little bit more. That's kind of how those things worked, in the lore. The Tleilaxu could, if they were going to revive somebody, make a Ghola of Duncan, Idaho, for example, they could say, you know what, we've made him a Mentat, and that's kind of just a nice little thematic perk that I like seeing realized in the gameplay. So, yeah, if you're thinking about leader skills, make sure you got the Tleilaxu in the game because it'll keep things fresh and lively. Somebody will always have some kind of skill, more or less. Any other final thoughts on the Tleilaxu?
I think there's one rule that many people miss because it's not really clear anywhere, that if anyone plays the Tleilaxu Ghola treachery card in the base game, Tleilaxu actually gets 1 spice from the spice bank as a little like fee, I guess, for using the services without them.
Yeah, they
So
still.
it's another way. It's not big. It's 1 spice, but it can be useful.
Yeah, and the reaction from the rest of the players is usually like, seriously? Ugh, they're getting that 1 spice? They're already getting too much spice, and you're like, well,
Yep.
too bad. They're getting that as well. And the interesting thing, and again, this is something that maybe is not obvious to a lot of players, but I certainly take advantage of it from time to time. When it comes to revival, you are not forced to take free revival. You can say, you know what, I'm going to forego free revival. this round because I don't want them getting that one spice. And if you're like, all right, I got 3 of my forces in the tanks, and I got some on the board, plenty in the reserves. I don't need the forces just yet. Maybe I'll take free revival next round, but I know that they just spent all their money in the bidding phase, and they're counting on as much spice as they can to come down and cause trouble. So I'm not going to take free revival, and I'm going to try to convince the Harkonnen, don't take free revival. You're in the same boat. You've got 5 guys in there, but you can do plenty with the 15 that you still have. And so, yeah, if they can make that happen, then the Tleilaxu don't earn quite as much that round. So maybe they don't cause as much trouble as they might have with a little bit more income. Especially if you're like, they can't spice dial because we're playing advanced. Every little spice is going to make a big deal. Or it could make a difference, and it might be the difference between I can full dial or I can't full dial. So yeah, just remember you don't have to take that free revival if you can afford not to. Fremen, of course, would be like, screw it, they can have the one spice. I'm getting 3 guys out. I just don't want to be unable to do some kind of a shipment action. So. Well, there you have it. If you are watching this and you still have questions about the Tleilaxu, let us know in the comments. And if you have your thoughts, where do you fall on the face dancer divide? Love them or hate them? Especially if you love them, by all means, chime in and share your thoughts and your funny stories about winning the game and causing the table to be flipped because you called 3 face dancers in the same round. It's kind of a bucket list thing, I think, because I'm not sure that I've ever managed to do it. I think 2 is the best I've been able to do in a game, and it's usually 2 for the whole game. That's about my average. I've revealed 2 face dancers, and one of them was like, all right, I got 1 guy in Habanya Siege because you dialed everything except 1. But I wanted to reveal it because if I've got 2 revealed, there's only 1 more, and then I get 3 new face dancers. That's really kind of what drove that decision. But yeah, it's not terribly common that you were like, oh, I called face dancer. Now I've got 9 Tleilaxu forces in Carthag. And and I called it again, and I got 3 more in Tabor. So I just need to get 1 more battle, and I can win this game single-handedly. Yeah, that's, while technically possible, very unlikely.
Love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know if that's happened because, we want that data. All right. Well, thank you guys for participating in this discussion. And, we have knocked out another faction. Still plenty more for us to address in battle language. And let us know any other topics that you would love to see the panel discuss or demonstrate and what have you. That's it for this video, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.